What's up, Sloth Uni? Decided to switch it up this time. You know, I'll be saying Sloth Uni almost every single time we started off. So I was like, first words of this one, it's not gonna be Sloth Uni. But tomorrow is the day we've been waiting for. Unless you're a Bills or Rams fan, all the takes and predictions we've had will either fall flat on its face or come to fruition. Our favorite teams will finally take the field and either get cooked or beat the brakes off of some poor saps. Because football is back. The air feels different. Mondays, Thursdays, and Sundays have a good vibe to them again. The birds are chirping. The sun is shining. The cleats are getting laced up. Grab some popcorn, put it in your tinfoil hats, and get comfortable. Because class is now in session. We got our Sunday start sit preview. We're going to be going over 7 of the teams that are playing Sunday, and we're going to have a part 2 that'll have the other 7. Starting off with this one, we got the 49ers versus the Bears. With the 49ers, your obvious starts. You're starting Trey Lance. You're starting George Kittle. You're starting Deebo Samuel. You may be starting Elijah Mitchell. Depending on who you have, I would personally start Elijah Mitchell as a running back too. Brandon Ayuk, I would start him as a mid-tier wide receiver 2, maybe a high-tier wide receiver 3, but he would definitely be a very solid flex option. Also, if you have the 49ers defense, that is a low-key great start. I wouldn't say great, but it's a low-key good start. The Bears offense shouldn't be too explosive, so they may create a few turnovers, they'll get a few stops, and I don't think they'll put up negative points. They'll be a solid defense. I don't think they'll go too crazy, but they'll put up a solid defensive play. The 49ers were the easy team in this because if you're drafting a 49ers player outside of Brandon Ayuk and Elijah Mitchell, you're starting them 100%. On to the Bears. We got Darnell Mooney, David Montgomery. Those are the only 2 clear and obvious starts, and even then, I could see a situation where you wouldn't start David Montgomery or maybe even Darnell Mooney. I personally have Darnell Mooney as a wide receiver 2, mid-tier, possibly a high-tier wide receiver. Not high-tier wide receiver 1. I don't know about that one. Low-tier wide receiver 1. And Cole Kmet, you can start him if you're in pretty desperate need of a tight end. Usually if you drafted Cole Kmet, he would have been your late round tight end. So you need a tight end. You're okay with Cole Kmet. He's a solid start. Justin Fields, if you are down bad for a quarterback, just like horrendously down bad, or if you play in a 2 quarterback league or a super flex league, he'll be okay to start. Other than that, I'm not really touching Justin Fields. I don't think there will be too many points put up in this game because these are 2 solid defenses. So other than the obvious starters, this wouldn't be a fantasy football bonanza. Moving on to the Browns-Panthers. The Browns' obvious starters, you got Nick Chubb. I feel like that's about it for the obvious starts. If you got Nick Chubb, you're starting Nick Chubb. Amari Cooper, I would be open to start him as a wide receiver 2, mid-tier, maybe a high-tier wide receiver 3. But if you have better options, I would probably start them. I'm not too comfortable with his QB situation. I'm not the biggest advocate, I would say, of Jacoby Brissett, but I'm not a Jacoby Brissett hater. Or I wouldn't say I don't believe in Jacoby Brissett, because he can be very solid and he has supported a productive wide receiver. Especially in his time in Miami, he had Jalen Waddle, and Jalen Waddle was doing fine even behind that O-line. And the Browns' O-line is much better than what Miami's was last year. So, in theory, Amari Cooper could be a solid start. But if you have better options, I would definitely go with better options. Because the Panthers' defense and their DBs are pretty good. Not saying they're going to lock up Amari Cooper, but I wouldn't expect him to have a huge game. Temper your expectations if you start him. If you have better options, lock him in. Kareem Hunt. I am a huge fan of Kareem Hunt. I love me some Kareem Hunt, just like I love me some Nick Chubb. And if you have better options out there, I would definitely start them over Kareem Hunt, especially in this week 1 game against the Panthers, whose defensive line was very solid last year. But I view Kareem Hunt as a mid-tier flex. I think he will definitely have value in this game. He will definitely get utilized in this game. And since their quarterback situation is a bit shaky, they're 100% going to rely on their running game a bit more. So there's definitely an opportunity for him there. He's shown opportunity in the past, and when he's gotten the opportunity, he's done good. So unless you have a clear-cut better option, I'm locking in Kareem Hunt as one of my flexes. I also wouldn't be opposed to taking a shot on David Njoku. I personally wouldn't start him unless I have like 0 people at tight end. Like I can't even get somebody off the waivers. I don't have a problem with David Njoku. They chose David Njoku. They paid David Njoku. But the quarterback situation is what's really scaring me here. Because I know Jacoby Brissett can at least bare minimum support one fantasy product. But if you're getting into the 2 range in a run-heavy offense where they got 2 really good running backs, that starts to get a little shaky. I would be okay with starting David Njoku under extreme circumstances. But if you have any let's put it like this. I would start Evan Ingram over David Njoku. I would start Robert Tonyan over David Njoku. Watch him just have a better game than both of these guys. But I would start some of the tight ends that you see either on the waivers or the leftovers from the people that didn't get Cole Kmet, that wasn't Cole Kmet, the tight ends that they're getting. I would start them over David Njoku. I like David Njoku, but in this matchup, not too sure about him. On to the Panthers. If you got CMC, you're starting CMC. You're scared to start CMC, but you're going to start CMC. Or you're not scared to start CMC. You're scared of what will happen once you start CMC. But you're starting CMC. DJ Moore. You're starting DJ Moore. If you got the Panthers defense, you're more than likely starting the Panthers defense. I don't know who drafted the Panthers defense. I personally didn't draft the Panthers defense, but I waited too long in one of my leagues to draft the defense. And I was looking around on the waivers and I was like, hey, you know what? The Panthers play Jacoby Brissett. I know they got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I know that Amari Cooper could not tear them up, but he could do some damage. But I have no defense right now. Like, the defense I drafted, I forgot they played the fucking Kansas City Chiefs week 1. So, you know what? I have to drop the Cardinals defense. I'm picking them up back later in a few weeks because I do believe in that defense. But as of week 1, Panthers defense will be my defense. I'm more than likely in that league going to stream defenses because the defense pool is just horrendous right now. All the good defenses got scooped up and you got left with whatever is left at the dump. I would also be open to starting Baker Mayfield. He wouldn't be one of my top options. I view him as more of a QB2. If you're in a super flex, a 2 QB league, I'm definitely comfortable starting Baker Mayfield. It's a revenge game for him, even though the Browns defense is really good. I think he'll be solid. Let's say that. I don't think he's gonna put up 4 touchdowns. He very well could. Now, I'm not saying he won't because he can, but I think he'll have a solid 250, 2 touchdowns, maybe a pick. He could have more than that. I don't really see him having less unless CMC just has a crazy game. But Baker Mayfield would be a very solid option. If you have better, 100% start it. But if Baker Mayfield is your best option, you got no other quarterbacks, you're in a 2 QB league, super flex, and Baker Mayfield was your second option, this is your boost of confidence. Go ahead and start Baker Mayfield. On to the Colts versus the Texans. If you drafted Jonathan Taylor, you're playing Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman, you're playing Michael Pittman if you drafted him. This is where we get into a little shaky. After Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor, the Colts offense doesn't really have too many people, and this is why I'm not really too high on the Colts this year, because yes, their defense is good. Yes, Jonathan Taylor is amazing. Michael Pittman is a very good wide receiver, but they haven't had a number 2 option outside of Michael Pittman develop. I do really like Alec Pierce. I was going to say Michael Pierce. I do really like Alec Pierce, but he hasn't shown anything on the field. He's a rookie. Who knows if he's going to guaranteed get the number 2 option. If you're in a very much of a pickle, if you have no other options, I would be okay. Very scared, but I would come to terms with starting Alec Pierce because I do believe he's a very talented wide receiver. I do think he'll rise to the top and become the number 2 options, but I'm not sure if it'll happen in week 1. This is the perfect opportunity for him to do it because the Texans aren't extremely good, but their defense is very solid. So it's not like it's a easy pickings game, But if you have no other options and Alec Pierce is right there, I would say you can start him, but it's more of a last resort. I see him more as a low-end wide receiver 3, low-end flex. Don't really have too much expectations for him, but if you literally have nobody else and you're like, okay, I need somebody to put up points on the board for me, I think he could get you a solid 8-9 points in PPR. Maybe 10 if he's feeling a little froggy, but I don't think he's going to do too much more than that. I wouldn't be surprised if he did too much more than that, but I'm not projecting it. Matt Ryan, I'm not starting Matt Ryan. I don't care like how good you say he's going to be. I'm not starting Matt Ryan this week. People who are very high on Matt Ryan are, I don't want to say they're insane, because that's just rude. I don't want to say they're stupid, because they're not. I do believe Matt Ryan will be very productive this year. I do think he'll have possibly a slightly better season than he did last year, but I'm not too sure he's going to have a better year than Carson Wentz did last year. If you're going to tell me Matt Ryan is going to throw for 27 touchdowns, then I may call you insane. I do believe he can throw for over 4,000 yards though. I 100% believe he can throw for 4,000 yards. And if he throws for 4,000 yards, then somebody else other than Michael Pittman is going to have to be catching balls, because Michael Pittman isn't going to he's not going to have 4,000 yards. So it's either going to be Alec Pierce, Nyheim Hines is going to be an option. I'm not starting Nyheim Hines, by the way. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but I'm not starting Nyheim Hines. But I do believe Matt Ryan will have a solid year as a NFL quarterback, but I don't think he'll be productive for you as a fantasy quarterback. Now, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, super flex league, I still really wouldn't start him. I would feel more comfortable with Joe Flacco in my starting lineup than Matt Ryan. I would feel much more confident with Joe Flacco in my starting lineup than Matt Ryan, because I don't see the peak for Matt Ryan. Like, I think he'll be really good for real life football, but I don't think he's going to put up too many touchdowns. He'll have the yards, but his touchdown total, watch him go out and put up like 5 touchdowns week 1 and just but his touchdown total on the season, I don't think it'll be too high. And he doesn't run the ball, so he doesn't have a rushing baseline. I just don't see the upside with Matt Ryan. That's where the problem really lies. He is going to be a phenomenal, I wouldn't say phenomenal. He's going to be an above average NFL quarterback, but I think he'll be a below average fantasy quarterback. And there are plenty more options. Listen, this is going to sound crazy, but I would start Jacoby Brissett over Matt Ryan. That was a little wild, but that's just me personally. That's just me personally. I would start Jacoby Brissett over Matt Ryan. Even in this game, I would start Davis Mills over Matt Ryan. Even though I wouldn't start Davis Mills anyways. Davis Mills, spoiler alert, Davis Mills he's one of the Texans sits. But I would start Davis Mills over Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan will 100% have his games where he does really good and you're really okay with him as your quarterback, but I'm not too sure this will be one of the games. Now it could be, and if he does have a good game, I don't want people to just assume that he's going to have game after game after game of productivity, because I just don't believe he will. Unless there's some options that step up, especially in the red zone, because that's really mainly where the problem lies, his lack of touchdowns. He only threw for 20 touchdowns last year. You're not going to be a good fantasy starter at quarterback only throwing 20 touchdowns on a season. But anyways, Colts defense, I would gladly start the Colts defense. I think they are going to have a very good day against this anemic Texans offense. Some Texans players will have pretty good days, but I think the Colts defense will be extremely solid. I was going to say they may end up finishing as the number 1 defense on the day, but the Rams defense did an amazing job, or the Bills defense, I believe. It was one of those defenses, maybe both of them, but one or two of those defenses from Thursday's game did extremely well. But I think the Colts will finish as a top 5 option on the week at defense. On to the Texans starts. You're starting Brandon Cooks. If you drafted Brandon Cooks, you're not 100% starting him, but this is a vote of confidence. I believe in Brandon Cooks. I think Brandon Cooks is an extremely, at this point, I don't even think he's underrated anymore, because the amount of times that people have said he's underrated, he really got the Keenan Allen treatment. Because the amount of times that people said Brandon Cooks is underrated, he is no longer underrated. Like, people acknowledge that Brandon Cooks is an extremely good wide receiver. The productivity and the longevity that he's done this for is one to be commended. But you know what you're getting from Brandon Cooks. He is the David Montgomery. I feel like David Montgomery is a bit better than him in his position, but he is the David Montgomery of wide receivers. You know what you're getting from him. He's not going to go crazy each and every week, but he's going to give you a consistent baseline, and he is going to give you some games where he puts up 20 plus points. I don't know if he's ever going to reach 30 points. He may have 1 or 2 30-point games, but he's not going to be a consistent 26 plus, 25 plus scorer, and he's not going to be a very consistent 20 plus scorer. But he won't break your team apart. He'll definitely put some points on the board for you, and he'll be consistent. So if you have Brandon Cooks, I think he is a very solid start. I am not afraid of the Stephon Gilmore matchup, but it's not an inviting one. I'll say that. I don't think he's going to have a crazy game, but I think he'll have a decent game. I don't think you'll be disappointed with starting Brandon Cooks. If you temper your expectations a bit, I don't think you'll be disappointed with starting Brandon Cooks. But definitely don't go in there thinking, okay, he's going to have 100 yards and a touchdown and 10 catches. It's possible, but not probable. The only other Texans start that I'm having is Dameon Pierce. And pump the brakes with this one, because yes, while I would start Dameon Pierce as a mid to low tier flex option, low running back 2, possibly high running back 3, this Texans offense is not very good. It could be very good this year. I wouldn't say very. It could be decent this year to good, but they have to prove it first on the field before I start making assumptions like that. Other people, they can have the benefit of the doubt, but the Texans, they've done nothing to prove that they can be extremely productive on the football field on the offensive side, and until they do, they should be treated as such. This is not an extremely good high-powered offense. Dameon Pierce may not even have third down role. He may not be catching passes. He will most likely have the head role, and he's going to have, I feel like he'll have over 12, 13 carries. If he has over 16, 17 carries, I'll be not surprised, but I wouldn't expect it with how deep they may get behind the Colts. Because if they get really behind the Colts, they may have to stop running the ball a bit, in which we'll see Rex Burkhead. This is not an pro Rex Burkhead take, by the way. This is just, don't start Dameon Pierce assuming he's going to get all the work, because Rex Burkhead is still there, and he's going to have a role, and it's going to be the pass-catching third down role. And if the Texans get behind in this game, it is going to be the Rex Burkhead show. And people who start Dameon Pierce expecting him to just go off will be very upset. We already did the Texans sit. It was Davis Mills. Anybody else you're thinking of, Nico Collins, don't start them. There's a reason they're not even mentioned. Don't start them. If you're starting Nico Collins, you got to be in like a 16 plus man league, because ain't no way. Like, I don't think I've seen more than 1, maybe 2 leagues where they took Nico Collins, and it was a dynasty league. On to the Eagles versus Lions. Eagles starts. You drafted Jalen Hurts. You're starting Jalen Hurts. You drafted AJ Brown. You may be a little scared of AJ Brown, but I'm here to say I was also scared of AJ Brown. I'm still scared of starting AJ Brown. And while I don't have any AJ Brown, if I had him, I would be starting him with confidence that he can at least put up wide receiver 2 numbers. Jalen Hurts isn't the greatest thrower of the football, but I don't think he's garbage by any means necessary. He did support Devontae Smith in his rookie year and led him to a pretty productive rookie year. And I do believe AJ Brown is better than Devontae Smith. And while I do like Devontae Smith, he's not going to be the number 1 in this offense. It'll be A.J. Brown. So A.J. Brown will be productive. Yes, there are a lot of mouths to feed in here, but I do think the talent of A.J. Brown will win out. He can take 4 catches in a game and turn it into 90 yards and a touchdown. He's just that type of talent. If you have Dallas Goedert, you probably waited a bit on a tight end, and all the tight ends that were gone, and you were just looking around and like, okay, I need a tight end. I'll take Dallas Goedert. Unless you're an Eagles fan or a Dallas Goedert supporter, in which you are definitely starting Dallas Goedert. I would start Dallas Goedert if you drafted him, because why would you just draft Dallas Goedert if you're not going to start him? Now, I don't think he'll have a crazy game, but I don't think he'll just absolutely poop the bed. I think he'll be a mid to low tier tight end too. He definitely, I would be surprised if he puts up more than like 5-6 catches, but it wouldn't shock me if he did. If there was an over under bet in Vegas or anything, I would definitely bet the over 3 or 4 catches. 3 catches, I don't, 4 would be a little scary. I would do 3. If there was a 3.5 over under on Dallas Goedert catches, I would do the over 3.5. But if it was over 4, over 4.5, then it starts getting scary. That's where I view Dallas Goedert right now, for this game at least. Miles Sanders, I would start Miles Sanders, but with all the news, especially from him, about how this offense will be with the running back position, I would be very scared of starting Miles Sanders. And if you drafted him, you probably drafted him a little bit late. Not too late, so he may very well be your best running back 2 option. And if he is your best running back 2 option, you put yourself in that position, because why would you just leave the draft with Miles Sanders as your second best running back? But you know what? I get it. Stuff happens in the draft. Unpredictable things. People taking who you want. You end up with Miles Sanders as your running back 2. You know what? I've been there. Last year, I ended up with Gus Edwards as my running back 2. And then he just went ahead, and he didn't do it himself, but he went ahead and got a season-ending injury. And week 1, I was looking at Melvin Gordon as my running back 2. And it turned out okay, because Melvin Gordon wasn't horrible. But these type of running backs as your running back 2, Miles Sanders is extremely talented, but he's in a system where they split up the carries a bit too much and the snaps a bit too much. So I do think he can very well deliver. And if you have no other better options and he's your best running back 2, I'll say this: Miles Sanders can very well have a good game, because I do think this will be a pretty decent scoring game. I don't know if it'll be crazy high scoring game, but I could see it turning into a high scoring game. I just don't project it because I like the Eagles defense, I like the Lions defense, but I also like the Eagles offense and I like the Lions offense. So I think points will be put up in this game. So there is an opportunity for Miles Sanders to put up points on the board just by being in this game that could turn into a back and forth affair. So if you have Miles Sanders and he's currently your best option at running back, I would start him. Devonta Smith, I have him in my start category, but I'm not the highest person on Devonta Smith. I love Devonta Smith as a talent, but A.J. Brown getting there, Dallas Goedert being there, this is an extremely run-heavy offense. I'm not too sure if I'm very keen on starting the number 2, possibly number 3 option on any given day of the week for this team. If you have better options out there, I would definitely start them. But if you have literally nobody, I would be starting Devonta Smith. I would let's see. I would start AJ Green. I would start 34-year-old AJ Green with confidence over Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith could have 5 catches for 66 yards, maybe a touchdown. But I would take the gamble of AJ Green being the number 2 in the Cardinals offense than Devonta Smith being the 2, maybe 3 in the Eagles offense. Catching balls from Jalen Hurts compared to catching balls from Kyler Murray. No disrespect to Jalen Hurts, who I like. But Devonta Smith this year is just, he hasn't been on my list of people that I've been drafting too much. I see him come up and it's my turn in the draft board, and there hasn't been a time in my mind where I saw him up and I'm like, you know what? I think I'll take Devontae Smith this round. No, it's been multiple other people that I'm like, I would very much take them over Devontae Smith. That's how I feel about him going into this week. On to the Lions starts. DeAndre Swift. If you got DeAndre Swift like me, you're starting him. I love some DeAndre Swift. I think he has a great game this week. Start him. TJ Hawkinson. You took TJ Hawkinson. You're starting him. Amon-Ra St. Brown. He ended off last year extremely good, and I'm not too sure he will keep it up because most of his production was a direct correlation to the injury of TJ Hawkinson, who I personally believe is the number one of this offense. But I do think Amon-Ra St. Brown proved to that offense and gained a trust with Jared Goff that just will not dissipate overnight. I think he'll have an extremely good role in this offense. I think he'll have a very solid season, and I definitely would start him as a mid-tier wide receiver 2 or a flex. Now, if you have any better options, by all means, go ahead and start them. But I wouldn't be looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown and like, okay, I think I need to bench this guy. Jared Goff, if you are in any doubts about starting this guy, maybe you're in a super flex league, you took him because he was one of the last quarterbacks available. Maybe you're in a 2 QB league because you took him as one of the last QBs available. I personally wanted him as my QB3, but sadly could not get him in my 2 QB league. But I'm very high on Jared Goff this year. I wouldn't say very high, but I think he does have a really good season, and I think this will be one of his good games. I have him as one of my sleepers of the week, aka Sloths of the week, I believe. And I am starting Jared Goff with confidence this week. For the Lions sits, I'm not starting Jamal Williams. I don't care how many snaps he gets along with DeAndre Swift. I'm not starting Jamal Williams. I think Jamal Williams is a very fine running back. I think he's a very fine fantasy option, but I just don't trust it. Now, if you have literally no other options, I would go to the waivers and pick up Mike Davis because he is a much better option than Jamal Williams. No disrespect to Jamal Williams, I just don't see the upside of him. Now, yes, he is going to get some carries. He's going to get some third down work. And quite possibly, he's going to take some red zone carries from DeAndre Swift. But the odds of him getting into the red zone compared to DeAndre Swift on these carries is more in the pathway of DeAndre Swift getting these touchdowns. He just has a nose for the end zone. That's one of the reasons why I drafted him, and one of the reasons why I fell in love with him during the draft process. His rookie season, like before he got drafted, his NFL draft process. He was my favorite. Now, he wasn't the best running back of that draft class because Jonathan Taylor exists, but he was my personal favorite because of his play style and the way he's amazing. That's all we're gonna say. But next bench, DJ Chark. Yes, I said I like Jared Goff, but this is an extremely run-heavy offense. They have Jamal Williams. They have DeAndre Swift, even though I'm not starting Jamal Williams. They have Jamal Williams. They have DeAndre Swift. And they have TJ Hawkinson and Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of DJ Chark in the totem pole of target shares. I am interested in Jared Goff, but I am not interested in Jared Goff's third option in a run-heavy offense. On to the Jaguars Commanders. For the Jaguars, I would be starting Trevor Lawrence. I'm personally starting Trevor Lawrence, and I still don't know how to feel about it because I think Trevor Lawrence has a very fine year. He wasn't my top option. He wasn't my top option for quarterback 2 in my quarterback 2 or my 2 QB league, but my main QB2, who I wanted very badly, Tua Tagovailoa, or Tua Tagovailoa Tagovailoa, got taken by, if you're listening to this, you're a menace to society. I hate you, and I face you week 1. So I don't want to say Tua. I hope Tua has a bad game, but I hope Tua has 530 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 picks, and the Dolphins win the game, because I'm gonna absolutely crush you this week. Trevor Lawrence is going to be amazing. He's not going to stink, but he's going to stink for fantasy this week because he loves me. Yes. Go Dolphins. Fins up. Anyways, I like Trevor Lawrence, but his performance last year does give me some pause because he's not a sure thing. And I don't know how much of it was because of Trevor Lawrence, and I don't know how much of it was because of Urban Meyer. That's one of the reasons why he was one of my QBs to keep an eye on and that I was okay with drafting in a pinch, but he wasn't one of my top options for those reasons exactly. And I mean, now I have no choice but to root for him. So, I mean, I like the Doug Peterson edition. I like Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram is a plus. Travis Etienne coming back is definitely a plus. I see he has the talent. It's just, can he put it all together? I mean, I think he does. I have him having a pretty good season. But, I mean, I would start him with confidence in this game. But if you have better options out there, especially in single quarterback leagues, take them. If you're in a 2-quarterback league and Trevor Lawrence is your second quarterback, I would be very much okay with that. Like, he's not going to be Tom Brady. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers of old. He's not going to be Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Trey Lance, all these other quarterbacks, but I think he can very well match with Tua does. Whatever you think Tua will do, unless you're a Tua hater. I mean, like, I think he can put up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns this game. Like, he'll more than likely have 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, with maybe some rushing yards sprinkled in. So I think he'll have a very solid day, but I don't think he'll just light it up week 1. He very well could, but I don't think he will. Christian Kirk. This one is pretty crazy because I like Christian Kirk. I really liked him coming out of college. I liked him in the Cardinals. But I never saw Christian Kirk and was like, this guy can be the number 1 wide receiver for a team. And now this team went out and paid him $20 million. And you're looking at the wide receiver core, and he very well might be the best wide receiver on this team. No disrespect to Marvin Jones, who is also a start, by the way. But you look at this wide receiver core, you look at this offense, and you're like, Zay Jones probably isn't going to be the one. Maybe Evan Ingram is the one because it's a very tight end friendly offense, especially with Doug Peterson. But Christian Kirk has the potential to be a very good fantasy option. If you drafted him, you got him for dirt cheap. And if he has a very good season, he'll pay 1,000-fold in return. I'm starting Christian Kirk if you have him, but I wouldn't go in expecting him to light it up. Now, Christian Kirk can easily go for 6 catches for 122 yards. I'm just pulling numbers out of my butt. But like, he can easily go for 6 catches for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, if Christian Kirk put up that stat line, I'll be like, you know what? I'm not surprised they paid him $20 million. So like, I'm not surprised that they made him the focal point of the offense. But Christian Kirk is someone who I wouldn't be ecstatic putting into my lineup. I would be fine with it. If he's your flex, I'm okay with it. If he's your wide receiver 2, I would be very frightened. Travis Etienne, he has an opportunity, especially in week 1, to take a firmer hold of his backfield. Now, James Robinson, who is also on the start list, we'll get to that in a moment though. He's coming back from a horrible injury, and his timeline for return was supposed to keep him out for much longer, but now he has a pathway to playing week 1. I don't buy it because I just don't see him playing week 1, and if he does, I don't know how many snaps he's gonna get. So that gives me a boost of confidence for starting Travis Etienne. For early in the season, I would very much have Travis Etienne over James Robinson, and I think he'll be the leader of this backfield. They are both running back 1 on the depth chart, but I don't think James Robinson gets a significant amount of snaps in week 1. So I would start Travis Etienne with confidence as a mid-tier RB2, possibly a high-tier RB2. Evan Ingram. If you have Evan Ingram in your starting lineup, you are at the depth of depths of barren wastelands for tight ends. And I'm here to tell you, it gets much worse than this, but it gets much worse than this. So be thankful that you have Evan Ingram, and be thankful for the 4 catches for 48 yards that he will get you this Sunday. Bless. Evan Ingram could very well have a great game, but I think Evan Ingram you won't be upset with what you get from him for what you drafted him for. For where you drafted him, I don't think you'll be upset at all with what he gives you, unless he just like gives you 1 catch. I would be pretty upset. But I doubt you'll be upset with what you get from Evan Ingram if you drafted Evan Ingram in like one of the last rounds of your draft. James Robinson, if he plays, I would start him as one of my flexes if I have no other options. Like, if I have literally zero other options, I would start James Robinson just on the off chance that he's miraculously recovered from this injury and he plays week 1. But you know what? No, I'm not starting James Robinson. I'm not starting James Robinson. I didn't want to put him in a sick category because I really do like James Robinson. But even if he's the last, I'm not starting James Robinson. I would gladly have James Robinson go off on my bench than have him in my starting lineup and have him get 0.7 points, because I would be very infuriated with that. I would much rather have him on my bench and put somebody in that's going to give me 5 points than put him in and him get 0.7 points or 1 point or 1.5 points. Stay away from James Robinson. Please sit him. Marvin Jones. I would start Marvin Jones just because I feel like he's earned that at this point as the only person on this Jaguars offense that was startable wide receiver wise on a week-to-week basis. And while he did give you some weeks where he just absolutely pooped the bed, I think with this improved offense, Trevor Lawrence is going to improve a bit. I think there's room for Marvin Jones to improve a lot more. He's shown that he can be a very productive wide receiver in the league. And while Christian Kirk got the bread, I think a lot of people, just like last year, are sleeping on Marvin Jones. While he's not the flashy pick, but I see a future where Marvin Jones finishes with the team lead in catches, team lead in yards, team lead in touchdowns. There is a very good possibility that Marvin Jones is the number 1 wide receiver of this team, and literally quite nobody is talking about it. I haven't been talking about it because nobody wants to talk about Marvin Jones, but it's the reality we live in, that Marvin Jones could very well be the number 1 wide receiver for this offense. If you have no better flex options, I would start him, and I wouldn't be too confident about it, but I don't think he'll just completely ruin your roster. Jaguars defense. I would start Jaguars defense. I wouldn't be extremely confident about it. Just like the rest of this Jaguars offense, I'm not extremely confident about. I'm pretty higher than normal people about the Jaguars, and that's what scares me. Like, you have these takes that you're just like, they're out of pocket, they're a little crazy, they're a little wild, but I see there's potential for the Jaguars to actually win this division. Now, I think the Titans will come out on top, but if the Titans don't come out on top of this division, I don't think the Colts will, and the Texans for sure aren't coming out in this division. And the only team that is plausible for me personally that comes out on top of this division is the Jaguars. And the only way that's happening is if Trevor Lawrence takes the next step and his Jaguars defense becomes extremely solid to good, which I do think they'll be, and I do think both of those things will happen. I'm not sure if Trevor Lawrence will take the next step into being a great quarterback, but I do think he'll take the next step into being a good quarterback. And I do think this Jaguars defense will be very good. And I don't think this Commanders offense will be very good. Yes, I like Carson Wentz, but the Commanders, there's something about the Commanders offense that's just been rubbing me the wrong way all offseason. Like, I love Antonio Gibson, I love Terry McLaurin, and I'm higher on Carson Wentz than your average football fan, but there's something about this Commanders offense that's literally just been rubbing me the wrong way. Like, you can go check the receipts. If you watched any of my videos or TikToks, you would think I'm a Carson Wentz supporter. I'm not a Carson Wentz supporter, but I do think he gets too much hate for what he's done. He's not amazing, but he's not garbage. But I will say, even though it was preseason, his preseason film did not look good. And yes, I understand that just because one starter does bad in the preseason doesn't mean they'll do bad in the regular season, especially with his track record and the success he's had in the league. But he's also had some really bad games in the league, and it just doesn't bode well for him. It's crazy because Terry McLaurin is playing with his best quarterback to date, and I'm still not too high on him. I feel like I'm too low on Terry McLaurin. We're going into the Commander starts, by the way. If I didn't mention it before, Zay Jones is a sit. Don't start Zay Jones. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it. James Robinson, Zay Jones, don't start him. But Terry McLaurin, if you drafted Terry McLaurin, you're starting him. Antonio Gibson, if you were one random unlucky bozo that drafted Antonio Gibson early, I am so sorry for everything, because I am also an Antonio Gibson supporter, and his fall from the top of this running back room, I wouldn't say the top of running back because he was never on the top of running backs, but his fall from grace has just been ridiculous. Like, he's an extremely talented running back. He's one of the most explosive running backs in the league with the ball in his hands, and he was about to get benched by a rookie before this said rookie got shot in the leg twice, maybe 3 times. I believe it was twice. But it's all because of fumbling. And now, yes, I do get that fumbling is a very big issue, and I get it. You turn the ball over, you get benched. But Antonio Gibson is extremely he's extremely talented. Him and Terry McLaurin were single-handedly, I wouldn't say single-handedly because that's a little disrespectful to Taylor Heineke, but they were essentially single-handedly holding up this offense on their backs with band-aids and sticky tacks. Like, it got to a point where when Logan Thomas was out, if Terry McLaurin didn't have a good game, Antonio Gibson didn't have a good game, the Commanders weren't winning. And I think they're still at that point because I don't think Carson Wentz will rise up enough. Antonio Gibson and Carson Wentz are starts. I think Antonio Gibson has a very good 4 to 5 weeks while Brian Robinson is out, maybe longer, depending on how long he's out for. But while Brian Robinson is out, I would be very confident in starting Antonio Gibson. The only problems will lie when Brian Robinson does come back, because Antonio Gibson is very good. Like, the only reason people were low on Antonio Gibson was because of the Brian Robinson stuff. Like, other than that, Antonio Gibson is extremely good for fantasy. He's a mid to high end running back too, with running back 1 upside. Even with JD McKissic in there, like, people are sleeping on Antonio Gibson. Still, it's crazy. But Carson Wentz, I would start him if you have, again, if you're in 2 quarterback or super flex leagues, I'll be okay with starting him. Other than that, I know you got better options out there. JD McKissic, I would be okay with sliding him into a starting role from one of my flexes, but I know you got better. I know you got better options than JD McKissic. Like, unless everybody's just playing in 16+ team leagues, you've got better options than JD McKissic. For the sits, I'm not starting Jahan Dotson. I'm not starting Curtis Samuel. Other than Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, Carson Wentz, JD McKissic, there's nobody I'm looking forward to starting on this Commanders offense. On to the Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins. This Patriots offense has looked and sounded extremely scary, and not in a good way. I have not drafted a single Patriots player in any of my leagues that I'm in. But I will say, if you have Damian Harris, you got to have better options at flex. Even if you don't, I would start Damian Harris just because of what he did last year. But he was one of those people where I was looking at them and I was just like, this guy is not going to have this amount of touchdowns next year. Like, touchdown regression is a big thing, and this guy will not. Watch him have 3 touchdowns on us, and that'll be 3 of his 9 touchdowns that he scores this year. But I'd start Damian Harris in a pinch. I think he'll be a low-end flex for a running back, or a low-end flex including wide receivers. He'll be a low-end running back too. But I'm not excited about starting Damian Harris. The Dolphins, no homer stuff, no bias. The Dolphins' run defense is really good. Yes, the Patriots have been very successful on the ground, but this is an entirely new scheme, they've said. Matt Patricia is calling plays. I don't think Matt Patricia is an idiot, but I don't think Matt Patricia belongs anywhere near offensive play calling. I'll just say that. Watch him hang 50 on us. But I'd start Hunter Henry if you were down bad at tight end. I'd be open to starting Hunter Henry. Ramondre Stevenson, if you have no other flex options, Ramondre Stevenson could be an option, but again, AJ Green gotta be on some of these waiver wires. I know nobody's out there just drafting AJ Green for fun. He's a 34-year-old wide receiver on the Cardinals who was behind Rondale Moore before the injury, Hollywood Brown, and presumably D-Hop when he comes back. There was no hope for AJ Green. I know he's on somebody's waivers. I would start AJ Green. If I said you gotta have better options out there, there are better options out there. There's no way AJ Green is not on. Let me check this really quick. Let me check this. I want to see just how many percentage of leagues he's rostered in. AJ Green is rostered in 11.7 leagues. If I once said there's got to be better options out there, AJ Green is the better option out there. Like, also Mike Davis. We haven't gotten to the spoiler alert for the Ravens game. AJ Green or Mike Davis, I would very much start them over majority of the people that I said there's got to be better options out there. Because if you had me say, are you starting Damian Harris or 34-year-old AJ Green, I would take off my glasses extremely slowly, stare you in your eyes intently, and slowly say, AJ Green. I would start Mac Jones if you're in a super flex or a 2 QB league, but again, there's got to be better options out there than Mac Jones at quarterback. I know nobody has Joe Flacco rostered, like unless you're in a 16+ team league, nobody has Joe Flacco rostered. I would much rather, honestly, not even joking, I would much rather start Geno Smith than Mac Jones against the Dolphins. And now, this is not saying the Dolphins' defense is at its peak right now, because Byron Jones is on the IR, I believe, or the NFI, one of those. He's not playing week 1. I still have no confidence in Mac Jones, mainly because of their wide receiver core and the fact that, again, they have Matt Patricia calling offensive plays. That is frightening to me. But if you've got no other options, listen, Joe Flacco's right there, man. Take the shot on Joe Flacco rather than Mac Jones. And now I know it deep down. I know the Dolphins are better than the Patriots. We've won 3-0 in our last games against the Patriots. 2 was undefeated against the Patriots. But there's no way you're not hearing all of this and you're like, Bill Belichick is going to do something about this. Like, you don't think Bill Belichick is doing everything humanly possible to beat the Dolphins for the first time in 3 straight games? Well, now 4 straight games. Like, I think the Dolphins will win, but the Patriots, I wouldn't be surprised if the Dolphins lose. Not saying the Patriots are better, but this is a divisional game. It could be very close. The Patriots will be on a mission to beat the Dolphins because they've gotten embarrassed the past 3 times they've played them. Tua's undefeated against Bill Belichick, and I know that just does not sit right with him, in his soul, in his spirit. But Jacoby Myers, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, keep them safely snuzzled up on your bench or your waivers. On to the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, you drafted him, you gotta start him. Tua, you drafted him, you gotta start him. Jalen Waddle, you drafted him, you gotta start him. Chase Edmonds, this is where stuff starts to get a little hairy. I like Chase Edmonds as a patchwork. I wouldn't say patchwork because I think he'll be solid for the season. But I like Chase Edmonds as, if you got no other options, this is not one of those AJ Green options. This is not one of those. If you got no other options at running back, I would be okay with starting Chase Edmonds. I think he'll be a fine mid-tier running back too, but I don't think he'll give you on a week-to-week basis high-end running back 2 numbers. I think he'll be a very solid running back, and I don't think you'll be disappointed with what he gives you. So start Chase Edmonds with confidence as your RB2 or flex. Mike Gesicki is one of those people who I like in real life football, but for fantasy, I've been avoiding him in every way, shape, or form because I don't see him as the last option on this team, but I think we'll run the ball. I don't believe we'll be super run heavy, but I do think we'll run the ball a good bit more than we did last year. There's Tyreek Hill, there's Jalen Waddle ahead of him in targets, and he's competing with Cedric Wilson, who I think he'll finish ahead of in targets and catches, but that's not very exciting for what you want in a tight end. He's had opportunities when he was the number 1 option to prove that he could be the guy, and he just didn't. So I'm out on Mike Gesicki for fantasy wise. I like him as a real life football player, but if you have Mike Gesicki, wow, someone is just riding a motorcycle extremely fast and very loud outside of the window. But if you have Mike Gesicki, this is your last chance to trade him. Because if there's anyone ready, willing, able to trade for Mike Gesicki, I would pull the trigger in trading Mike Gesicki. Do not trade for Mike Gesicki. I would trade Mike Gesicki. I want no business of Mike Gesicki. This is coming from a Dolphins fan. I want no business of Mike Gesicki this season because he wasn't doing very good when he was the top option of this team. So what do people think he's going to do when he is now the 3rd or 4th option of this team? Raheem Mostert. This is an AJ Green. If you have better options out there, take them. But if you don't have better options out there, Raheem Mostert is a decent start. I think he'll get a bit of work, but I don't think he'll do too much. So he's better left on the bench, but if AJ Green, if you're one of those 11.7 rosters or 11.7 leagues that AJ Green is somehow rostered in, I mean, he's rostered in this 11.7 because I picked up AJ Green. I had Rondale Moore. So you know what I did? I put Rondale Moore in the IR, picked up AJ Green. But if AJ Green is not available in your league and you have Raheem Mostert, this is like a 1% chance. If you have no other better options, I would start Raheem Mostert. Dolphins defense, I'm not too keen on them being dominant this game, but I see a pathway for them to be a decent starter. I don't think you'll be upset starting a Dolphins defense. I'll say that much. And for our last game of this Sunday preview, part 1 start sit, we got the Ravens versus the Jets. Ravens starts. The obvious ones, we got Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews. That's about it. Rashad Bateman, if you drafted Rashad Bateman, he's more than likely either your wide receiver 2 or your flex. I would be cool with starting with Rashad Bateman. I really do like Rashad Bateman, but there's been a lot of buzz about Sauce Gardner, and if he is who they say he is, Rashad Bateman may not have a very good game. I mean, the guy I'm playing in my main league has Rashad Bateman. So, I'm kind of hoping Rashad Bateman does bad, and I kind of don't think he'll do too good. So, you know what? Fingers crossed. I'd start Rashad Bateman, though, as a wide receiver 2 flex option. If J.K. Dobbins plays, I would start him simply because he's J.K. Dobbins, but I would temper my expectations a bit. Now, he claimed on Twitter that he would be ready for week 1. So, I'm going to assume he plays, but there's still a chance that he may not play. And if he does not play, Mike Davis will have an opportunity to be a very solid option. I brought up Mike Davis quite a lot, but he's out there in a lot of leagues. Nobody wanted Mike Davis, but he has a very good opportunity here to put up some fantasy points. He's been productive in the past. Yes, he wasn't too great on the Falcons, but the Ravens found ways to be productive with, I feel like, who were worse running backs last year. So there is room for Mike Davis to be a very solid option. If you are someone like who in my main league is a crazy man and has Raheem Mostert as your running back 2 or flex option, Mike Davis would be someone who I would be picking up immediately to start. Ravens defense. I think they will finish as one of the top options on the week. Yes, I said Joe Flacco is a solid start, but I did not say I would be starting Joe Flacco. I would just start Joe Flacco over those people who I said I would bench as an example of how much I do not want to start them. But I would not be starting Joe Flacco. Spoiler alert, he's one of the sits for the Jets. Speaking about the Jets, first start up, we got Elijah Moore. Next, it gets crazy after that. I would start Breece Hall and Michael Carter, with Breece Hall being the main one who I would start. Michael Carter, I would start him in a pinch. I would probably start Mike Davis over Michael Carter if J.K. Dobbins doesn't play. But if J.K. Dobbins does play, I would start Michael Carter over him. I have Michael Carter finishing as a lower end RB3, lower end flex, because I think he'll have a role on this team. I mean, they still say he's the lead back, but I think Breece Hall will take over very quickly. But I mean, who knows? I felt like James Cook would take over very quickly in Buffalo. I mean, Breece Hall has a much more clear path to taking over than James Cook did. But I think Breece Hall will eventually take over this backfield. It may not happen in week 1, but I am predicting it to happen in week 1. I very highly doubt that Breece Hall will get 15 plus carries. But if Breece Hall ended up with 15 carries, 3 catches, I would look at that stat line and be like, yeah, I 100% expected this to happen. On for the sits. If you notice, I did not mention Garrett Wilson. Well, that's because I'm not starting Garrett Wilson. No. Anybody else who wasn't mentioned on the Jets, don't start them. Like, until Zach Wilson comes back or until they prove that they are to be trusted, they're not welcome in the lineup. Joe Flacco, I would start in like the pinchiest of pinches. Like, if you have any of those QBs that we just listed, I would start Joe Flacco over them. The QBs for the bench aisle, that is. But I don't feel too confident about Joe Flacco either. Garrett Wilson, Joe Flacco, any other Jets person that wasn't mentioned, bench. And with that, we're finished with our first half of games. Feel free to check out part 2, which should be available on the same platform you're listening to on right now. If you have any start-sit decisions, questions, roster questions, don't be shy to ask me through Twitter reply, DM, or adding me. But as always, if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out Twitter at Sloth University and our TikTok using the same handle for some extracurricular activities. Most importantly, stay safe and spread love. Class dismissed.
All right, kid, here's the deal. At any given time, there are around 1,500 aliens on the planet. Most of them right here in Manhattan. And most of them are decent enough. They're just trying to make a living.
Cab drivers.
No, not as many as you'd think. Humans, for the most part, don't have a clue. They don't want one or need one either. They're happy. They think they have a good bead on things.
But why the big secret? People are smart. They can handle it.
The person is smart. People are dumb, panicky, dangerous animals, and you know it. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet.
Imagine what you'll know tomorrow.